Okay, our new unit is the Middle East. And before we get to the individual countries, I think it's worth spending time going over the culture. Well, one thing you need to keep in mind is that a lot of the entire world's perspective of the United States comes from our media, the depiction that they receive from movies and television shows primarily. And the Middle East is no exception to this. The primary way that they view the United States, and in particular women in the United States, is greatly shaped by our media. So think about that. If all you knew about the United States was the movies that you watch, how are women viewed or portrayed in movies? And most of the time, it's just uh, they are objectified. It's all about their bodies. That's what gives them self-worth, and it is okay to whistle at them, to kiss them, to hit on them, and keep in mind then that's what they think the typical person, the typical woman in the United States is like. That's how she is to be treated. Because of that, it is vitally important if you travel throughout the Middle East to be mindful of the culture, be mindful of their view of you, and to do what you can then to protect yourself. Everyone should, at least in the big cities, the populated areas, be wearing pants, even though it's a warm climate. It's just not recommended that you wear shorts or skirts or things like that. And this is out of respect for their definition of modesty, but also for your own protection. And in general, it is highly recommended in many countries of the world, and the countries of the Middle East is no exception to this. It's important that you have a male chaperone, an escort, just a male presence to kind of, I don't want to say claim you, but if you are kind of claimed by the male who is around you, then they're less likely to give you any problems. Some other aspects of their culture, things that you should know about this region. It is incredibly wealthy, huge reserves of oil these countries have. Many of them are members of OPEC, which stands for the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. And this is their flag. You can kind of make out an O, and then a P, and then an E, and then a C here, OPEC. And again, Organization of Petroleum, which is just a fancy word for like gas, exporting countries. And the members in the Middle East, the nations that are part of OPEC, are Iran over here, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. And if you look at the nations that have the highest GDP per capita, the entire nation's wealth divided by its population, Qatar is number one, or some people pronounce it Qatar. Then you have a bunch of micronations. Liechtenstein and Luxembourg are micronations in Europe. Singapore is a micronation in Asia. Norway is an anomaly because of the oil they get off the North Sea. But you have Qatar or Qatar, Kuwait, you have Bahrain. But notice the number one spot, and it's a pretty substantial jump, and this is older information, but they're regularly at the very top. These nations, these smaller nations that have huge amounts of oil in the Middle East. Continuing on with the culture, Bedouins. Bedouins it's the term used to describe nomads that are in the desert raising sheep and goats. And couple things, and while this is maybe more true of the Bedouins, it's kind of true in general in the Middle East that hospitality is vitally important. And so things today, Bedouin will still, they take this so seriously that they will slaughter a goat for you if you stumble across them, even uninvited. If you just kind of walk up to a Bedouin family, the importance, the need to be seen as hospitable is so important that they will kill a goat for you. They will. I traveled in Israel, and we stumbled across a Bedouin family, and they invited our entire group of, it was maybe about 45 people. They invited us into their tent, And they immediately, on the spot, stopped what they were doing. They baked bread. They gave us coffee. Every single one of us. It was crazy. They also will protect their guests with their lives. And you can just see that in Genesis 19, where Lot protects the lives of the two angels when they visit Sodom and Gomorrah. He's like, no, it is so I must protect you. And you see Abraham inviting what he didn't realize were angels or God coming in. He immediately stopped and provided them with food. Shopkeepers, for instance, in Beirut, Lebanon, I found online on a travel thing that they will occasionally walk you from their shop. If you ask, how do I get to this place? And they know, oh, it's 3 blocks down this street. They will actually walk you to the destination to make sure you get there. Again, offering coffee to a guest is very important. And so with that in mind, it's also important that you don't reject it then. Before we got off the bus to when I was in Israel to visit this Bedouin family, unannounced, our guide said, don't get off this bus if you can't eat or drink whatever they will give you. It's very, very rude if you were to reject it. A sign of a great disrespect. So you have to eat everything. He said they might actually kill a goat for us, and if they do, you have to eat it. And recognize that if you are, right down here, if you are a man and you are the oldest, you will get served first, and they might give you the best parts. He said that they might even offer you the goat's eye, and you have to be willing to eat that. So it's important to accept their signs of hospitality. Some hosts will even force you to eat to show their hospitality. Even if you said, no, I just ate, I'm stuffed, I couldn't eat anything. They will make you. One very bizarre thing compared to our culture is that when you have greasy hands from eating, freshly slaughtered goat that's been roasted, you take those greasy hands and you wipe them on the tent, and the greasier, more kind of what we would say disgusting the tent, wow, look at this person, they must be very hospitable. Look at the greasy sheen on the walls of their tent. Crazy to us. You should burp. That's considered an indicator that the meal that they offered you was good, that it was delicious. And you should not actually clean your plate, which is, I would say, kind of the opposite of how people in the United States handle this. You got to clean your plate. It's wasteful. No, if you clean your plate, that means that they didn't offer you enough food, that you are still hungry. And so, oh no, I want to be a good guest, so I better put more food on their plate, whether they ask for it or not. And so they will do this. And so it's funny, if the two cultures aren't aware of this, we will feel the need, I don't want to leave anything on my plate. They'll think I didn't like it. And so you'll clean off the plate and you're like, oh, please don't give me any more food. And they would be thinking, oh, this person is greedy and a glutton. Look at how they cleaned off their plate. They're demanding more food. And it's just a horrible cycle. So beware of that if you were to ever travel to the Middle East. Also recognize that showing the soles of your shoes is very, very offensive, and you should never greet someone with the left hand. You shouldn't shake hands. You should be careful what you touch with the left hand. Even eating with the left hand is considered kind of unclean because it's your wiping hand, your bathroom hand in their culture. I wanted to point this out too. There are certain kind of verbal formulas that they use in their culture. If you ever have to talk about something that is like kind of taboo, unpleasant, negative, like if you're going to talk about death, for instance, people will typically say, may it remain far from you. If you have to talk about a shoe or a foot or certain animals that are unclean, like maybe a pig, make sure you say, they will say something like alachak or hasak, kind of, may you remain far above this lowly topic, this dirty topic. It's just kind of interesting. You also can't talk about the Middle East without talking about Islam. If we were to look at this chart, and I just want to focus on one thing primarily, look at Bahrain, overwhelmingly Muslim. They are followers of the religion Islam. Cyprus is kind of an anomaly here, the island in the Mediterranean Sea. They are overwhelmingly Orthodox Christians. Iran, 99% follow Islam, and of that 99, 90% of the country is Shia Muslim. There's two big denominations, Shia and Sunni. So Iraq, overwhelmingly Muslim. Israel, Judaism. So we have Cyprus and Israel that are not overwhelmingly Muslim. And then you have Jordan, Muslim. Kuwait, Muslim. Lebanon is another kind of strange one here. It's about half and half. Half Muslim, half Christian. But then Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Turkey, United Arab Emirates, Yemen, they're all overwhelmingly Muslim. So let's look at Islam. What is it actually? And for those of you who are in world history, this will be hopefully mostly review. But for those of you who aren't, there might be a whole lot of new things in this, so pay attention. Islam. Most people in the Middle East are Muslim. We just saw it on the chart. And a Muslim means that they are a follower of Islam. So if it's like saying a Christian is a follower of Christ or Jesus. Their Bible, what they call their holy book, is the Quran. And in order for a Quran to actually be authoritative, to be the most accurate, it must be in Arabic. They actually discourage the translation. So in Christianity, we're all about translating into every language on the planet. Muslims, no. It needs to be in Arabic because that is kind of the language of God, of their God. What is their God? Allah. Now, technically, Allah is just the Arabic word for God. So if I was a Christian that spoke Arabic, I would call the Christian God Allah. The reason we use this distinction, though, is it is helpful to know if someone's talking about the God of Christianity out in the United States, we in general just kind of say God, and people understand it in this culture that you're probably talking about the Christian God. If you want to make it clear in the United States that you're not talking about the Christian God, then people will say Allah, the Arabic word for God. Technically, though, it's just the Arabic word for God. Some of you may be looking at this picture of the Quran and say, whoa, it's backwards, it's flipped. No, they read in reverse. So the book binding would be on this side, and you would start here on this side, not flipped over. A couple of other things that you should know. The final, greatest prophet of Islam is said to be Muhammad. He is the best, the kind of the pinnacle, the final. There isn't a need for another prophet in Islam because Muhammad was so good. There is something known as jihad, which is like the holy war of Islam, that if you engage in jihad, a war for Allah, the God of Islam, then you are guaranteed to go to heaven. Instead of having a church or a synagogue, Muslims have mosques, so it's their place of worship, and this is a very large, decorative mosque. Mecca. Mecca is the holiest city in all of Islam. It's the most sacred, the most special place in the world, and every Muslim is expected to go here at some point in their life if it's at all possible. Now, if you're too poor to travel there, or if you have some medical condition that doesn't permit it, you know, Allah understands. But if you don't have that excuse, you are expected. This is something that is required of you. So the holy city is Mecca, and Mecca is, if I go to the map here, you can see it right here. It's in Saudi Arabia, near the Red Sea, and it's a sacred city in which Muslims are allowed to go and no one else. And in the center of this humongous complex is the Kaaba. And some people call it the Black Stone. And when you go on this pilgrimage, you gradually approach the Kaaba. A Muslim is expected to pray towards Mecca 5 times a day, and they have very specified prayers and very specified times of the day. And if you go to an area that has a large Muslim population, you might even hear speakers, see speakers installed all over the place, and there will be the call to prayer that is played over those speakers, and people stop what they're doing, and they will roll out their prayer rug, and they will bow down and they will recite their prayers towards the city of Mecca. I already talked about this one. You're supposed to travel to Mecca at least once in your life. Medina is maybe the second holiest city. This is where Muhammad is buried, and this is where the city of Medina accepted his teaching first, and then he used their residents and their army to attack and conquer Mecca. So Medina is very important. And finally, Jerusalem. So these are the three most important cities: Mecca, Medina, and Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is where Muhammad was actually lifted up into heaven. They use a different calendar. They use the year of Hegira. And so the year 2000 for us would have been the year 1420. So it's not until the Hegira that time started. And it makes sense. We are Christians, and we go based on the year of our Lord, Jesus, roughly, when Jesus was born. They go based on the life of Muhammad. Heaven, and this is highly debated. I feel like I need to throw this out there because you've maybe heard it. According to some people in Islam, heaven is a place that looks like the Garden of Eden, lush gardens, and it's filled with many virgins for each man who is a good Muslim. But this is based upon, and I don't want to get too off track here, but it's based on a saying that was kind of passed along orally. And in world history, we'll talk about that in more depth. But that is not actually found in the Quran. It's just, it's like, well, this person heard this person who listened to this person who had this person as a teacher, and they heard Muhammad say, and then they say that heaven is paradise with gardens and water and 70 virgins or something like that. So maybe you've heard about this. It's technically not in the Quran, but some people believe in that. So what are the big differences? Well, first of all, I think it's worth pointing out a lot of the similarities. Muslims believe that there is only one God. Muslims believe in Jesus, that he was an actual person and actually a very great holy person. They call him the Messiah. They believe he was born to Mary, that he did incredible things. Died on the cross, didn't die on the cross, but that there was something with the cross and that he performed miracles. And they believe in a bunch of the other notable people that we have in our Bible. You know, Abraham and Daniel and Elijah and so on. So what are the differences, though? Because it doesn't matter how many similarities you have. If the differences are a big deal, that's a non-negotiable. And yes, there are multiple things. Here are, I would say, the two biggest areas where Muslims clash with Christians. Muslims are monotheistic, they say, and Christians, you're just polytheistic. Poly meaning many. You believe in many gods. Don't say that you believe in one God. So they reject the idea of the Trinity, that there is God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. They say, no, that you believe in three different gods. We are the true monotheists, mono meaning one. So they don't like the idea of the Trinity. We admire and respect Jesus, and that brings us to our second difference here. They have great respect for Jesus. He is one of the greatest prophets, probably second only to Muhammad. But that's all he is, just a human prophet. And Christians, and this is a non-negotiable, you must believe that Jesus is God, that his role in the Trinity is the Son of God. And so if you can get a Muslim to get past these two things, then they're basically a Christian, or they're one step away from being a Christian, because these are the two things that will hold them back. I can't believe in your God because your God, you say, is actually three gods. And I just can't accept that Jesus is God himself. So I think we'll stop there.